Three experienced nannies walked into the Henderson mansion on Maple Ridge Drive. Each one lasted exactly 24 hours before fleeing without explanation, leaving behind their belongings and refusing to speak about what they'd witnessed. The wealthy family was desperate, offering double the usual salary to anyone willing to care for their 7-year-old daughter. Emma, that's when Maria Castellanos, a seasoned housekeeper with 15 years of experience, decided to take the job. She thought she'd seen everything in her years of domestic work. She was wrong. What Maria discovered in that house would haunt her forever. And the truth about little Emma Henderson would shake the entire community of Willowbrook to its core. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maria Castellanos had cleaned houses in Willowbrook for 15 years, and she prided herself on never walking away from a job unfinished. At 42, she had seen her share of difficult children, demanding employers, and unusual family dynamics. So when the Henderson family contacted her through the Domestic Services Agency, offering an unprecedented salary to care for their daughter Emma, Maria felt confident she could handle whatever challenges awaited her. The Henderson mansion sat at the end of Maple Ridge Drive, a sprawling Victorian estate surrounded by towering oak trees that seemed to swallow the afternoon sunlight. As Maria walked up the cobblestone pathway, she noticed how eerily quiet the neighborhood was. No children playing in yards, no sounds of lawnmowers or barking dogs. Just an unsettling silence that made her footsteps echo louder than they should. Dr. Richard Henderson answered the door before Maria could even ring the bell. He was a tall, thin man in his early 50s, with graying hair and deep circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. His wife, Catherine, appeared moments later, clutching a cup of coffee with trembling hands. Both looked as if they'd aged years in just weeks. "Thank God you're here," Catherine whispered, her voice barely audible. "We're at our wits' end." Dr. Henderson led Maria into an opulent living room filled with antique furniture and family portraits. The house smelled of expensive candles and something else Maria couldn't quite identify, something stale and unpleasant that seemed to linger in the air. "I'm sure the agency explained our situation." Dr. Henderson began wringing his hands nervously. "Emma is. She's been having some difficulties since we moved here 6 months ago. We've had 3 nannies, all highly recommended, all with excellent references." "What kind of difficulties?" Maria asked, settling into an ornate chair that creaked under her weight. Catherine and her husband exchanged glances that lasted several seconds too long. Finally, Catherine spoke. "Emma has been experiencing what we believe are night terrors, very intense ones. She wakes up screaming, but she's not really awake. Sometimes she speaks in, well, it's hard to explain. She speaks in voices that aren't hers," Dr. Henderson added bluntly, ignoring his wife's sharp look. "Deep voices, adult voices. Sometimes she seems to know things she shouldn't know." Maria had worked with children experiencing trauma before. Night terrors weren't uncommon, especially after a major life change like moving to a new home. "Has she seen a child psychologist?" 3 of them, Catherine replied. "They all say different things. Some think it's adjustment disorder, others believe it's a sleep disorder. One suggested we consider other possibilities." The way she said other possibilities made Maria's skin prickle, but she maintained her professional composure. "Where is Emma now?" "In her room napping," Dr. Henderson said. "She rarely sleeps through the night anymore, so she's exhausted during the day. We hoped you might be able to establish a better routine with her." Maria nodded. "I'd like to meet her before we discuss the specifics of my duties." The couple led her up a grand staircase lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. The second floor felt noticeably colder than the rest of the house, and Maria found herself suppressing a shiver. They stopped at a door painted pale pink, decorated with a small wooden sign that read, "Emma's Room," in cheerful purple letters. Dr. Henderson knocked softly. "Emma, sweetheart, there's someone here to meet you." A small voice answered from within. "Come in." Emma Henderson was sitting cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by stuffed animals and coloring books. She was a beautiful child with long blonde hair and striking green eyes that seemed far too mature for her 7 years. She looked up at Maria with an expression that was neither friendly nor hostile, but rather calculating, as if she was studying every detail of the stranger's face. "Hello, Emma," Maria said warmly, stepping into the room. "I'm Maria. I'm going to be helping take care of you." Emma tilted her head to one side, never breaking eye contact. "The others said that too." "What others, sweetheart?" Rebecca, Jennifer, and Susan. They all said they were going to take care of me." Emma's voice was matter-of-fact, almost adult-like in its tone. "But they all left." Rebecca cried when she left. Jennifer just ran. Susan threw up in the bathroom before she packed her suitcase. Maria glanced at the Hendersons, who were standing in the doorway looking increasingly uncomfortable. She turned back to Emma. "Well, I'm not going anywhere. I've been taking care of children for many years, and I'm very good at my job." Emma smiled, but it wasn't the innocent smile of a 7-year-old. It was knowing, almost predatory. "We'll see." That first evening passed without incident. Maria prepared dinner, helped Emma with her homework, and read her bedtime stories. The child was polite, articulate, and seemed remarkably well-adjusted for someone supposedly suffering from severe night terrors. As the sun set and darkness crept across the mansion grounds, Maria began to wonder if the previous nannies had simply been inexperienced or easily frightened. Dr. and Catherine Henderson retired to their bedroom wing at 9 o'clock, leaving Maria with strict instructions to wake them immediately if anything unusual occurred. Maria settled into the comfortable chair in Emma's room, planning to monitor the child's sleep patterns firsthand. Emma fell asleep quickly, her breathing becoming deep and regular. For 2 hours nothing happened. Maria began to relax, even allowing her own eyes to close for brief moments. Perhaps this assignment wouldn't be as challenging as she'd anticipated. At exactly 11:47 p.m., everything changed. Emma's eyes snapped open, but she remained lying perfectly still. In the dim light from the hallway, Maria could see that the child's pupils were dilated to an unnatural degree, making her green irises appear almost black. Emma's lips began to move, but no sound emerged at first. Then came the voice. It was deep, gravelly, and completely unlike anything that should have come from a 7-year-old girl. "She thinks she's different," the voice said, and Maria felt every hair on her arm stand on end. "She thinks she's stronger than the others." Emma's body remained motionless, but her head turned slowly toward Maria's chair. The movement was wrong somehow, too controlled and deliberate for someone who was supposed to be asleep. "Emma," Maria whispered, her professional training warring with a primal instinct to flee. The thing wearing Emma's face smiled, and when it spoke again, the voice had changed. Now it sounded like an elderly woman with a pronounced southern accent. "Emma ain't here right now, honey, but don't you worry. She'll be back in the morning, and she won't remember a thing." Maria's hands gripped the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. She forced herself to remain calm, to think rationally. This had to be some form of dissociative episode, a psychological manifestation of trauma. Children were remarkably adaptable, and sometimes that adaptation took disturbing forms. "Who am I speaking with?" Maria asked, surprised by how steady her own voice sounded. Emma's body sat up in bed with jerky, puppet-like movements. "Oh, we're many, dear. So very many. This house has been collecting us for decades, and little Emma is such a perfect vessel. So young, so empty, so ready to be filled." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees in an instant. Maria could see her breath forming small clouds in the suddenly frigid air. The shadows on the walls began to move independently of their sources, twisting and writhing like living things. "We know all about you. Maria Castellanos," the voice continued, now sounding like a middle-aged man with a slight lisp. "Divorced at 35. No children of your own. You think caring for other people's children will fill that empty space inside you, but it won't. Nothing will." Maria felt tears sting her eyes, not from fear but from the cruel accuracy of the words. How could this child possibly know such intimate details about her life? Emma's head tilted at an impossible angle, nearly touching her shoulder. Rebecca lasted 18 hours. She ran after we showed her what happened to the previous family who lived here. Jennifer made it 22 hours, but she was weak-minded. Poor Susan only lasted 14 hours, but she fought us. We respect that. What do you want? Maria managed to ask. We want what we've always wanted. To live, to breathe, to feel warm blood pumping through young veins again. Emma's body began to levitate slowly off the bed, rising until she was floating 3 feet above the mattress. And we want you to stay, Maria. Stay and watch. Stay and learn. Stay and eventually join us. The room filled with whispers in dozens of different voices, overlapping and echoing until they became a cacophony of desperate, hungry sounds. The portraits on the walls seemed to move, their painted eyes following Maria's every movement. The stuffed animals on Emma's bed turned to look at her with button eyes that now gleamed with malevolent intelligence. Maria closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and made a decision that would determine whether she became the 4th nanny to flee the Henderson mansion, or something else entirely. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maria opened her eyes to find Emma sleeping peacefully in her bed, no longer floating, no longer speaking in alien voices. The room temperature had returned to normal. The shadows had stopped moving, and the stuffed animals were just ordinary toys again. For a moment, Maria wondered if she had hallucinated the entire episode. But the lingering taste of metal in her mouth and the way her hands still trembled told her otherwise. She remained in the chair until dawn, watching Emma sleep with the restless vigilance of a soldier on guard duty. When the first rays of sunlight streamed through the curtains, the child stirred naturally, yawning and stretching like any normal 7-year-old. "Good morning, Miss Maria," Emma said brightly, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. "Did you sleep okay in the chair? It doesn't look very comfortable." Maria studied the child's face carefully, searching for any trace of the malevolent intelligence she had witnessed hours earlier. Emma's green eyes were clear and innocent, showing genuine concern for Maria's comfort. There was no recognition, no hint that she remembered floating above her bed or speaking in voices that belonged to the dead. "I slept fine, sweetheart," Maria replied, forcing a smile. "How about you? Any dreams?" Emma shook her head. "I never remember my dreams anymore. Daddy says that's normal, but sometimes I wake up feeling tired, like I didn't really sleep at all." Dr. Henderson appeared in the doorway, looking haggard and anxious. "How did everything go?" he asked, his eyes darting between Maria and his daughter. "Uneventful," Maria lied smoothly. Emma slept through the night. Relief flooded the man's features, but it was tinged with skepticism, as if he couldn't quite believe such good news. "Really? No episodes?" Emma looked confused. "Episodes? What kind of episodes, Daddy?" Dr. Henderson's face went pale. He knelt beside his daughter's bed and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Nothing to worry about, Princess. Why don't you go brush your teeth while I talk to Miss Maria?" After Emma skipped off to the bathroom, Dr. Henderson closed the bedroom door and turned to Maria with desperate eyes. "She really doesn't remember, does she? The doctors said that was possible, but seeing it firsthand—" "Dr. Henderson," Maria said carefully, "I need you to tell me everything about this house. Everything about what's been happening here." He ran his hands through his thinning hair. "We bought this place from the Blackwood estate 6 months ago. The price was incredibly low for a property of this caliber, but the realtor said it had been on the market for years. Apparently, the previous owners left abruptly and never returned. What happened to them? Nobody knows for certain. The Blackwood family, Harold, Patricia, and their twin daughters, simply disappeared one night. Their car was found at the airport, but there was no record of them boarding any flights. The police investigated, but without evidence of foul play." He shrugged helplessly. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. "When did Emma's episodes begin?" 3 weeks after we moved in. At first they were just nightmares. She would wake up crying, talking about the people in the walls. We thought it was normal adjustment anxiety. But then the sleepwalking started and the voices. Has she ever mentioned specific names? Or said things she couldn't possibly know? Dr. Henderson nodded grimly. Last month, she described in perfect detail the layout of our previous house in Boston, the one we lived in before she was born. She knew about the hidden safe behind the bookshelf, knew that Catherine had once fallen down the basement stairs and broken her wrist. Emma was never in that house, and we've never spoken about those memories in front of her. The implications sent ice through Maria's veins, but she pressed on. What about the other nannies? What exactly did they tell you before they left? Rebecca claimed she saw Emma talking to invisible children in the attic. She said there were dozens of them, and they all looked angry. Jennifer insisted that Emma had somehow gotten hold of personal information about her family, details about her deceased grandmother that no one else could have known. Susan. He paused, struggling with the memory. Susan said Emma predicted her sister's car accident 3 hours before it happened. Emma's cheerful voice called from the bathroom. Miss Maria, can you help me reach the mouthwash? I'll be right there, Maria called back, then turned to Dr. Henderson. I need to see the attic. Absolutely not. His response was immediate and firm. That area of the house is off limits. We've had it sealed since the second nanny incident. Dr. Henderson, if you want my help, you need to trust me. I'm not like the others who ran away. But I can't protect Emma if I don't understand what we're dealing with. After a long moment, he nodded reluctantly. Tonight, after Emma goes to bed. But Catherine can't know. She's already talking about selling the house and moving again. The rest of the day passed in deceptive normalcy. Maria prepared meals, supervised Emma's online tutoring session, and engaged the child in various activities. Emma was delightful company, intelligent, funny, and surprisingly mature in her conversations. She showed no signs of the supernatural manifestation Maria had witnessed the night before, but as evening approached, Maria began to notice subtle changes. Emma became quieter, more withdrawn. She kept glancing toward the stairs leading to the upper floors, as if listening for something only she could hear. During dinner, she barely touched her food, instead staring at the empty chair at the head of the table. Daddy, why don't we ever sit in Grandpa Harold's chair? Emma asked suddenly. Dr. Henderson nearly choked on his water. Emma, we don't have a Grandpa Harold. Where did you get that name? Emma looked genuinely puzzled. I don't know. I thought someone told me that chair belonged to Grandpa Harold. Catherine and her husband exchanged frightened glances. Harold Blackwood had been the previous owner of the house, but they had never mentioned his name in Emma's presence. That night, after Emma was tucked into bed and Catherine had retired to her room with a sleeping pill, Dr. Henderson led Maria to a narrow staircase hidden behind a bookshelf in his study. The wooden steps creaked ominously as they climbed toward the attic, their flashlight beams dancing across cobweb-covered walls. The attic was larger than Maria had expected, stretching across the entire length of the mansion. Dust particles swirled in their flashlight beams, and the air smelled of old wood and something else, something organic and unpleasant. Along the walls, Maria could see dozens of wooden trunks and cardboard boxes, all bearing the name Blackwood in faded black letters. The previous owners left all this behind, Dr. Henderson whispered, his voice barely audible in the oppressive silence. We were supposed to have it removed, but the estate lawyers said it would take months to sort through the legal issues. Maria approached one of the trunks and lifted the lid. Inside, she found yellowed photographs, children's toys, and what appeared to be journals written in multiple hands. She picked up one of the journals and opened it to a random page. The entry was dated 15 years earlier. The children came to Harold again last night. Mary Elizabeth says there are more of them now, gathering in the spaces between the walls. She's only 4 years old, but she speaks with the wisdom of the dead. I don't know how much longer we can stay in this house, but where else can we go? This has been happening to our family for generations. Dr. Henderson, Maria said, her voice tight with growing horror. How long has your family owned this house? We don't own it, he replied. We're just the latest in a long line of caretakers. The deed shows that it's been passed down through multiple families for over a century, but somehow it always comes back to the Blackwoods, or people connected to the Blackwoods. Maria continued reading, flipping through pages that documented decades of supernatural encounters. Different handwriting, different dates, but always the same story: children in the house becoming vessels for spirits that refused to move on. "Your wife," Maria said slowly, a terrible realization dawning on her. What was her maiden name? Dr. Henderson's face went white in the flashlight's glow. Blackwood," he whispered. "Catherine Blackwood Henderson." The temperature in the attic plummeted so rapidly that Maria could see her breath. The journals in the trunk began to flutter as if blown by an invisible wind. And somewhere in the darkness beyond their flashlight beams, Maria heard the unmistakable sound of children giggling. "We need to leave," Dr. Henderson said urgently. "We need to leave right now." But as they turned toward the staircase, they found their path blocked by a small figure in a white nightgown. Emma stood at the top of the stairs, her eyes completely black in the dim light. "Nobody leaves," she said in a voice that belonged to Harold Blackwood. "Not until the debt is paid in full." Dr. Henderson grabbed Maria's arm, pulling her back as Emma, or whatever was controlling her, began to descend the attic stairs with movements that were far too precise for a sleepwalking child. Each step was deliberate, calculated, and accompanied by the sound of creaking floorboards that seemed to echo from impossible directions. "The debt Harold speaks of," Maria whispered, her mind racing through the journal entries she had just read. "What debt?" Dr. Henderson shook his head frantically. "I don't know. Catherine never told me about any family debts. She said her great-uncle Harold was eccentric, but she barely knew him." Emma reached the bottom of the stairs and tilted her head at an unnatural angle, studying them with those solid black eyes. When she spoke, Harold Blackwood's voice carried the weight of decades of bitterness. "Catherine knows exactly what debt I speak of. She's known since she was Emma's age, when her grandmother brought her to this house for the first time." The entity wearing Emma's face gestured toward the dusty trunks. "Every generation of Blackwood women has tried to escape their inheritance. Every generation has failed. The spirits bound to this house are owed their due, and that debt passes down through the bloodline until it's satisfied." Maria stepped protectively in front of Dr. Henderson, her years of caring for troubled children overriding her fear. "Emma, I know you're still in there somewhere. Fight this. Don't let them use you." A laugh bubbled up from the small throat, but it was the harsh cackle of an old man. "The child sleeps while we work. She feels no pain, remembers nothing. It's a mercy, really. Much kinder than what happened to the previous vessels." "What happened to them?" Maria demanded. Emma's body turned toward one of the larger trunks, and with strength no 7-year-old should possess, she lifted the heavy wooden lid. Inside, Maria saw dozens of small objects: a child's bracelet, a stuffed rabbit, a pair of tiny shoes, and what looked like locks of hair tied with faded ribbons. "Mementos," Harold's voice explained through Emma's lips. Each item belonged to a child who served as a vessel before their bodies simply wore out. "The spirits are hungry, you see. They consume everything: energy, memories, eventually even the physical form itself." Dr. Henderson made a strangled sound. "How many children?" "Dozens over the decades. The house needs fresh vessels regularly. Emma is simply the latest in a long line of Blackwood descendants called to serve." Maria's protective instincts blazed into full force. She had spent her career helping children, and she refused to stand by while this one was consumed by malevolent forces. There has to be a way to break this cycle, some way to free the spirits and release Emma. Emma's head swiveled toward Maria with owl-like precision. "Clever woman. Yes, there is a way. But it requires a willing sacrifice. Someone must take Emma's place as the primary vessel, allowing her to escape while the spirits find a new host." "Absolutely not," Dr. Henderson said immediately. "We'll leave tonight. We'll move across the country, change our names." "You tried that in Boston," Harold interrupted. "You tried that in Chicago before Boston. You tried that in Seattle before Chicago." The house calls its own back, Richard. Catherine can run to the ends of the earth, but the debt follows her bloodline wherever it goes. Maria's blood ran cold as the implications sank in. The night terrors didn't start when you moved here. They've been following Emma her whole life, haven't they? Dr. Henderson's silence was answer enough. Emma smiled with knowledge far beyond her years. The manifestations grow stronger each time Catherine tries to flee. Moving to this house was supposed to be the end of her running, a final surrender. But she's still fighting, still hoping for escape. Her resistance is what makes Emma's possession so violent, so traumatic. "Show me the other journals," Maria said, moving toward the remaining trunks. "Show me everything." Over the next hour, while Emma stood motionless as a sentry, Maria discovered the horrifying truth about the Blackwood family legacy. The journals, photographs, and documents painted a picture of generational, supernatural servitude dating back to the 1800s. Each family had tried to break free, and each had ultimately been forced to sacrifice their children to appease the hungry spirits. The earliest journal belonged to Jeremiah Blackwood, dated 1847. "Built this house on land the locals warned me against. Cherokee burial ground," they said, but I paid no mind to superstition. Now I understand their warnings. The dead here don't rest. They hunger for the warmth of living flesh, and they've chosen my bloodline to provide it. Another entry, from 1923. "My daughter Sarah speaks in tongues now. The spirits wear her like clothing, using her small body to interact with our world. The doctors say she suffers from hysteria, but I know better. This is the price our family pays for disturbing sacred ground." A more recent journal from the 1990s revealed the most chilling detail. Harold discovered that the spirits can be temporarily satisfied with voluntary vessels, adults who choose to bear the burden instead of the children. But the volunteers never survive more than a few months. The spirits consume them completely, then demand another child to replace them. Maria closed the journal with trembling hands. The choice before her was becoming terrifyingly clear. She could allow Emma to be consumed slowly over the years, as dozens of children had been before her. Or she could volunteer to take the child's place and buy her freedom with her own life. "You understand now," Harold said through Emma's voice. Catherine's grandmother made the same choice in 1962. She volunteered to become the primary vessel so Catherine could escape. It worked for 30 years. But when Catherine had a daughter of her own, the debt transferred to the next generation. "What about Catherine's parents?" Maria asked. "Dead. Car accident when Catherine was 16. The spirits don't like to wait, and they have ways of expediting the process when necessary." Dr. Henderson sat heavily on an old wooden crate, his face buried in his hands. All this time Catherine knew. She knew what bringing Emma here would mean, but she hoped there might be another way. "There is no other way," Harold stated flatly. "There never has been. The only choice is who bears the burden, the child or someone willing to take her place." Maria looked at Emma's possessed form, at the small hands that should have been drawing pictures or playing with toys, at the innocent face now twisted with ancient malice. She thought about her 15 years of caring for children, about the empty space in her own life that had driven her to dedicate herself to other people's families. "If I volunteer," she said quietly, "Emma goes completely free? The spirits release their claim on her and any children she might have? For one generation, yes. The debt resets, but it will eventually call another Blackwood descendant in 30 or 40 years." "That's not good enough," Maria said firmly. "Oh, there has to be a way to end this permanently." Emma's black eyes glittered with something that might have been respect. "You want to break a curse that's lasted nearly 2 centuries? Ambitious. But yes, there is a way. If someone volunteers not just as a temporary vessel, but as a permanent guardian, someone who willingly binds themselves to this house forever, the spirits will consider the original debt satisfied." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means you would join us," Harold explained. "Your spirit would become part of the collective that haunts this house. You would spend eternity here, neither alive nor properly dead, helping to maintain the balance between worlds." But in exchange, the Blackwood bloodline would be free forever. Maria felt the weight of the decision crushing down on her. She could save Emma, free her to live a normal life, but only by condemning herself to an existence worse than death. Around the attic, she sensed other presences stirring, the accumulated spirits of everyone who had made similar bargains over the decades, all waiting to see if she would join their eternal vigil. Emma took a step closer, and when she spoke, her voice had changed again. Now it was the voice of a young woman, sad and pleading. "Please, Maria, I was Catherine's age when I made the choice to save her. I've been waiting 40 years for someone else to free the next child. Don't let Emma suffer the way I did." Maria closed her eyes, feeling the tears she'd been holding back finally spill down her cheeks. When she opened them again, her decision was made. "I accept," Maria said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of her decision. "I'll become the permanent guardian. But I have conditions." Emma's possessed form tilted its head curiously. The collective of spirits seemed to pause, as if surprised that someone would attempt to negotiate the terms of their own spiritual imprisonment. "You're hardly in a position to make demands," Harold's voice replied, though there was a hint of intrigue in his tone. "Actually, I am," Maria said. Her years of dealing with difficult children, teaching her that sometimes the most effective approach was calm assertiveness. "You need a willing sacrifice. If I'm going to spend eternity bound to this house, then you'll do this properly." She walked to one of the open journals and began reading aloud from a passage dated 1962. "Margaret Blackwood's sacrifice ceremony." The spirits agreed to specific terms before she volunteered. She negotiated protection for Catherine and a 30-year grace period before the debt would transfer. "If Margaret could set conditions, so can I." Dr. Henderson looked up from his hands, hope flickering in his exhausted eyes. "What are you thinking, Maria?" "First condition," Maria announced, addressing the entity controlling Emma. "Emma's memories of everything supernatural that's happened in this house get completely erased. She deserves to grow up without nightmares about floating above her bed or speaking in dead people's voices." Emma's black eyes narrowed. "Acceptable. The child's ignorance will make her freedom more complete." Second condition, Dr. and Catherine Henderson are allowed to take Emma and leave this house tonight. They will never be compelled to return, and no supernatural force will follow them wherever they choose to live. Also acceptable, provided the permanent guardian takes residence immediately. Maria nodded and continued. "Third condition, you will reveal to me the true origin of this curse. I want to know exactly what Jeremiah Blackwood did in 1847 that bound your spirits to this place. If I'm going to spend eternity here, I deserve to understand why." This time the pause was longer. Emma's possessed form seemed to confer with invisible presences, her head turning slightly as if listening to whispered conversations Maria couldn't hear. "That knowledge comes with a price," Harold finally said. "Understanding the full truth about this place will show you things that even death cannot erase from your memory. Are you certain you want that burden?" "I'm certain," Maria replied, though her stomach churned with anticipation of what she was about to learn. Emma's form straightened, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed to that of an elderly Native American woman. "I am Ayana, daughter of Chief Standing Bear of the Cherokee Nation. This land was sacred to my people for over 1,000 years before the white settlers came. We buried our dead here because the boundary between worlds is thin in this place. The spirits of our ancestors could easily travel between the realm of the living and the realm of the dead." The temperature in the attic dropped further, and Maria could see her breath misting in the frigid air. Around them, the shadows began to move and coalesce into human shapes, dozens of them, all watching her with eyes that held centuries of pain and anger. "Jeremiah Blackwood knew the land was sacred," Ayana continued through Emma's voice. "The Cherokee warned him, begged him to choose another place to build. But he was a greedy man who saw only valuable property at a cheap price. He built his mansion directly on top of our most sacred burial ground, desecrating the graves of over 200 of my ancestors." One of the shadow figures stepped forward, becoming more solid. Maria could see it was a tall man in 19th century clothing, his face gaunt with hunger and rage. "I am Jeremiah," the figure said in its own voice now, no longer speaking through Emma, "and I learned too late that some boundaries should never be crossed." "What happened?" Maria asked, though she was beginning to understand the horrific scope of what Jeremiah had unleashed. The desecration of the burial ground created a tear in the fabric between worlds, Ayana explained. The spirits of my people, who should have been able to pass peacefully to the afterlife, became trapped in this plane of existence. They were hungry, angry, and desperate to reclaim what was stolen from them. Jeremiah's spirit picked up the narrative. "At first I thought the house was just cursed with bad luck. Servants quit without explanation, guests left in the middle of the night, livestock died for no apparent reason. But then the possession began. My youngest son, Thomas, started speaking in Cherokee, describing burial rituals he'd never witnessed and calling out the names of dead warriors. The spirits needed living vessels to interact with the physical world, Ayana said. Children were easiest to possess. Their minds were more flexible, less resistant to spiritual intrusion. But the Cherokee dead had no desire to harm innocent children. They were trapped, not evil. Maria looked around at the dozens of shadow figures surrounding them. If they didn't want to hurt children, then what changed? Why did this become a cycle of consumption and death? Emma's possessed form smiled sadly. Because Jeremiah panicked. Instead of seeking to make amends for his desecration, he tried to fight the spirits. He brought in priests, spiritualists, anyone who claimed they could cleanse his house. Each attempt to banish the Cherokee dead only made them more desperate, more violent in their need to find anchor points in the living world. The breaking point came in 1851. Jeremiah's spirit continued, his voice heavy with centuries of guilt. A traveling preacher convinced me that the only way to save my family was to perform a binding ritual to trap the Cherokee, spirits permanently in the house, so they couldn't follow us if we left. But binding rituals require balance, Ayana said. To trap Cherokee spirits in this place forever, Jeremiah had to offer something of equal value in return. He pledged his bloodline as eternal caretakers, promising that there would always be a Blackwood descendant available to serve as a vessel when the spirits needed one. Maria felt sick as the full horror of the situation became clear. He enslaved both the Cherokee spirits and his own family line to solve a problem he created. Precisely, Harold's voice said through Emma again. For nearly 2 centuries, Blackwood children have been sacrificed to maintain the binding that keeps the Cherokee dead from spreading beyond this house. And Cherokee spirits have been forced to possess unwilling vessels, becoming more corrupted and twisted with each passing generation. Dr. Henderson, who had been listening in stunned silence, finally spoke. If the original sin was Jeremiah's desecration of the burial ground, couldn't we, I don't know, somehow restore it? Make amends to the Cherokee spirits? Ayana's shadow form turned toward him with what might have been hope. The burial ground still exists beneath this house. Her bones lie under the foundation, mixed with the concrete and steel of Jeremiah's construction. If they could be properly reinterred in sacred ground, if the appropriate rituals were performed, the tear between worlds could be healed, but that would require destroying the house entirely, Maria said, understanding the implications. And even then, someone would need to guide the spirits through the healing process. Someone who could serve as a medium between the Cherokee dead and the living world. Someone like me, she realized. That's what you really need, isn't it? Not just a vessel to possess, but a spiritual guide who can help you find peace. Emma's body nodded slowly. The permanent guardian position isn't just about maintaining the curse. It's about eventually breaking it. But it requires someone willing to spend decades, perhaps centuries, learning the ancient ways, building trust between Cherokee spirits and Blackwood descendants, and slowly healing the damage Jeremiah caused. Maria looked around at the assembled spirits, Cherokee warriors, and shamans who had been trapped for nearly 200 years. Blackwood family members who had been consumed by the curse they inherited, and children who had died serving as unwilling vessels. All of them were waiting to see if she would choose the path that might finally lead to their freedom. "There's one more condition," Maria said. "If I do this, if I become the guardian and work to break the curse, I want a promise that no more children will be harmed in the process. No more possessed 7-year-olds, no more consumed vessels. Whatever spiritual energy you need, you take from me and me alone." The spirits exchanged glances that somehow conveyed entire conversations. Finally, Ayana spoke. "We accept all your conditions, Maria Castellanos. But you must understand, the path to breaking this curse could take lifetimes. You may succeed, or you may join the ranks of those who tried and failed. Are you prepared for that possibility?" Maria looked at Emma's small form, still standing motionless under the control of ancient spirits, and made her final choice. "I accept the guardianship," Maria said, her voice carrying a finality that seemed to echo through the dimensions. "But we do this right. We start the healing process tonight." The moment she spoke those words, Emma's eyes rolled back, and she collapsed to the attic floor. Dr. Henderson rushed to his daughter's side, checking her pulse and breathing, while Maria felt an immediate change in the atmosphere around them. The oppressive weight that had hung over the house seemed to lift slightly, replaced by something that felt almost like hope. Emma's eyes fluttered open, and for the first time since Maria had met her, they were completely clear. No ancient intelligence lurked behind them. No supernatural awareness clouded her gaze. She looked up at her father with genuine confusion. "Daddy, why are we in the attic? I thought I was sleeping in my bed." Dr. Henderson gathered his daughter in his arms, tears streaming down his face. "You were sleepwalking, Princess, but you're awake now, and everything's going to be okay." Around them, the shadow figures of the Cherokee spirits began to materialize more clearly. Maria counted at least 30 distinct forms, ranging from elderly shamans to young warriors. At their center stood Ayana, who appeared to be in her 60s with long braided hair adorned with feathers and beads. "The child is free," Ayana announced. Her voice no longer filtered through Emma's vocal cords. "The binding that connected her to our realm has been severed. She will remember nothing of the supernatural events that occurred here." Maria felt a strange, tingling sensation beginning in her fingertips, spreading slowly up her arms. The transformation was starting, but it wasn't the violent possession she had witnessed with Emma. Instead, it felt like a gradual awakening of senses she never knew she possessed. "Maria," Dr. Henderson said urgently, "are you sure about this? There has to be another way." "There isn't," Maria interrupted gently. "And even if there were, this is my choice. Take Emma and leave. Drive straight to the airport and get as far from here as possible. Don't look back." Dr. Henderson stood with Emma in his arms, but he didn't move toward the stairs. "What about Catherine? She needs to know what happened here, needs to understand that Emma is finally free." "Tell her," Maria said, feeling her perception beginning to shift as the guardian transformation deepened. "Tell her that her family's debt has been paid in full. Tell her that Emma can grow up normal, have children of her own without fear, live the life Catherine never could." Emma looked up at Maria with sleepy eyes. "Miss Maria, are you going somewhere?" Maria knelt down, so she was at Emma's eye level, fighting back tears. "I'm going to stay here and take care of the house, sweetheart. But you're going home with your daddy, and you're going to have wonderful adventures and make lots of friends and be very, very happy. Will I see you again?" "Someday," Maria lied, knowing that by the time Emma was old enough to return to this place, if she ever chose to, Maria would be something far different from the woman the child knew now. Dr. Henderson carried Emma toward the stairs, pausing only to look back once. "Thank you," he whispered. "We'll never forget what you've done for our family." After they disappeared down the narrow staircase, Maria turned to face the assembled spirits. The tingling sensation had spread throughout her entire body now, and she could feel her consciousness expanding, touching the edges of other minds. Oh, the memories that spanned centuries. The transformation is beginning, Ashana said, approaching Maria with a mixture of sadness and relief. You will retain your own memories and personality, but you will also gain access to all of ours. The knowledge of every spirit bound to this place will become yours to bear. What happens next? Maria asked, though she was already beginning to understand through the growing psychic connection. We begin the work of healing, replied an elderly Cherokee shaman whose name came to Maria unbidden, Sequoia, medicine man and keeper of the old ways. The house must be carefully dismantled so that our remains can be recovered and properly reinterred. Sacred ceremonies must be performed to cleanse the land of nearly 2 centuries of spiritual contamination. But the house is protected by legal trusts. Historical designations, Maria protested, even as she felt her human concerns beginning to fade into a broader perspective that encompassed spiritual as well as temporal realities. Jeremiah Blackwood's spirit stepped forward, his face no longer twisted with guilt, but showing the first peace Maria had seen from him. The house is protected by supernatural forces, not legal ones. As the guardian, you will have abilities that transcend human limitations. Time moves differently for spirits. What seems impossible to accomplish in a human lifetime becomes achievable when you have centuries to work with. Over the following hours, as dawn broke over the Willowbrook mansion, Maria learned the true scope of her new existence. She could interact with the physical world when necessary, but she was no longer bound by its constraints. She could appear to living humans when the situation required it, but her primary focus would be the complex work of spiritual mediation. The first phase involved establishing communication with the Cherokee tribal authorities, appearing to their spiritual leaders in dreams and visions to explain the situation and request permission to begin the reinterment process. This alone would take months of careful negotiation across spiritual planes. The second phase required documenting every supernatural event that had occurred in the house over the past 177 years, creating a comprehensive record that would allow the trapped spirits to process their experiences and begin the healing journey toward the afterlife. The final phase would involve the physical destruction of the house and the proper ceremony to release all bound spirits, Cherokee and Blackwood alike, to their appropriate destinies. As the days passed, Maria discovered that her guardian abilities allowed her to reach beyond the confines of the mansion. She could monitor Emma's progress as the Henderson family relocated to Denver, ensuring that no residual supernatural influence followed them. She watched Emma start at a new school, make friends, and display none of the disturbing behaviors that had marked her time in the haunted house. Dr. Henderson kept his promise to tell Catherine the truth about their family's curse. The revelation was devastating, but ultimately liberating. Catherine finally understood why she had spent her entire life feeling like she was running from something she couldn't name. With the curse broken, she began therapy to process the generational trauma that had shaped her family for nearly 2 centuries. 6 months after Maria's transformation, the first Cherokee tribal elder arrived at the mansion. To the outside world, Professor Joseph Running Bear was conducting an archaeological survey of historically significant properties in Willowbrook. In reality, he was responding to the spiritual communications Maria had been sending, preparing to authenticate the presence of the burial ground and begin the legal process of reclaiming the land. The work was slow and methodical. Each step had to be approved by both tribal authorities and municipal governments, requiring Maria to occasionally manifest to living officials in carefully controlled circumstances. She appeared as a historical researcher, a legal representative for the Blackwood estate, whatever role was needed to move the process forward. 2 years after Emma's rescue, ground-penetrating radar confirmed the presence of extensive human remains beneath the mansion's foundation. The Cherokee Nation filed a federal lawsuit under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. demanding the right to properly inter their ancestors. 3 years after that, the mansion was carefully deconstructed under the supervision of tribal archaeologists and spiritual leaders. Maria watched from the realm between worlds as the bones of Ayana's people were finally freed from their concrete prison and transported to sacred ground for proper burial. On the night of the final ceremony, as Cherokee shamans performed the ancient rituals that would heal the tear between worlds, Maria felt the chains that had bound her to the mansion beginning to loosen. One by one, the Cherokee spirits stepped through the newly opened doorway to the afterlife. Their long imprisonment finally ended. Jeremiah Blackwood and the other family members who had been consumed by the curse also found their path to redemption. Their centuries of guilt and suffering were finally balanced by the ultimate healing of the damage they had caused. As the last of the bound spirits departed, Maria found herself standing alone in what had once been the mansion's attic, now nothing more than empty air above reconsecrated ground. She had expected to feel abandoned, but instead she felt complete in a way she never had during her human life. Ayana appeared beside her one final time. "The guardianship is ended," the Cherokee elder said. "The curse is broken, the land is healed, and justice has been served. You have fulfilled your purpose beyond anything we dared hope for. What happens to me now?" Maria asked. "That is your choice," Ayana replied with a gentle smile. "You can move on to whatever awaits beyond this realm, or you can remain as a protector of sacred places, helping to prevent future desecrations. There are other burial grounds under threat. Other spirits who need a guardian's guidance." Maria looked out over the land where the mansion had stood, now returned to its natural state and protected in perpetuity by tribal ownership. Somewhere in Denver, Emma Henderson was growing up free from the supernatural burden that had plagued her family for generations. The debt was truly paid, the cycle finally broken. "I think I'll stay," Maria said, feeling a profound sense of purpose settling over her like a warm embrace. And there's still work to be done. As the sun rose over the reclaimed sacred ground, Maria faded into the space between worlds, ready to begin her next mission as guardian of the boundary between the living and the dead. Behind her, the land itself seemed to exhale in relief. Finally at peace, after nearly 2 centuries of supernatural torment, Emma Henderson, now 12 years old and 3,000 miles away, woke from a dream she couldn't quite remember. Something about a kind woman with gentle eyes who had promised to keep watch over sacred places. She smiled, feeling inexplicably safe and protected, then got ready for another perfectly normal day in her perfectly normal life. The debt was paid. The guardian watched. And somewhere in the realm between worlds, Maria Castellanos continued her eternal vigil, ensuring that no other child would ever have to pay the price for the sins of their ancestors. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.